Good morning. It looks like it's going to rain this afternoon. I'll turn on the dehumidifier to prevent a headache. I offer flowers at the altar and reminisce about that smile from the past. Did I manage to take good care of everything? Did I make them happy? My father-in-law, always kind and considerate towards his imperfect daughter-in-law. It's lonely without you, but I am living my life firmly. Past and future alike. I am Tiffany, 29 years old. It's been 6 years since I married and moved into my husband's family home. Raised in a home with old-fashioned values, I had an arranged marriage as dictated by my parents. The family I married into also had its old traditions. There are some aspects slightly out of touch with common societal norms. However, life wasn't as restrictive as I feared. With my father-in-law, a solid figurehead, and my mother-in-law, who occasionally says odd things but is harmless at the helm. My husband, Kevin, is busy with the family-owned company. We don't have a very clingy relationship, and he's not keen on having children, which is a bit disappointing, but overall, our relationship is quite good. Until my father-in-law passed away. Oh, Tiffany, always slacking off. No wonder the weather is turning grim. The humidity is unbearable. Talking to a photo every day. How morose can you get? The one complaining is my mother-in-law. Her voice, seemingly coming from the top of her head, resonates even more annoyingly since my father-in-law's death. As if the pitch has risen several notches. Good morning. I went out to the garden and saw the flowers he loved blooming, so I cut them before the rain. I said, trying to keep a smile on my face. I didn't want to ruin the joy I felt this morning here. But my mother-in-law's face grew even more displeased. What's this, flaunting the flowers you've offered? Trying to show off that you've taken care of it, huh? Is this some kind of jab at me? A deep furrow, like a marine trench, formed between my mother-in-law's brows. I sigh inwardly. I wish she'd quit frowning as much as she fights with her beauty roller every night. Really, you have no common sense. Turning on the dehumidifier before it even starts raining. What a waste of electricity. My mother-in-law dripped with sarcasm, as if asking who she thought would pay for it. Since my father-in-law passed, it's as if something in my mother-in-law has snapped. The occasional nagging has significantly increased. I wonder if it's a misplaced venting of loneliness for losing her partner. I ignored it at first, but lately. It seems she seeks me out just to vent. Kevin asked me to wash and dry his shirts for his business trip starting tomorrow. It dries fastest here. That's what my husband asked me this morning before he left for work. But with the weather forecast predicting rain in the afternoon, air drying was going to be difficult. Oh, what a grand excuse. Blaming Kevin for your lack of planning and being an incompetent wife, how embarrassing. Blaming others when it's clearly your fault, the nerve. Has your skin thickened since you came to this house? Disgusting. My mother-in-law frowned even more, but I haven't been slacking on housework. It's impossible to prepare for sudden laundry requests. But my mother-in-law doesn't care about such circumstances and keeps nagging. She mentioned the damp and sticky weather earlier, but that's how I feel about her. More annoying than the clinging humidity is my mother-in-law. And to make matters worse, she twists the day's events to make me look bad to my husband. At first, my husband didn't pay much mind, but lately, he's been asking me to make her stop because it's annoying, or he gets in a bad mood. Blaming me. Because of this, my mother-in-law's nagging and her almost entirely fabricated tattling don't seem to be subsiding. In fact, it feels like it's escalating. But if I confront her directly, her shrill voice becomes so loud it could be heard outside the house. And then, she'd wreak havoc on the housework I've just done or snip off the buds from the garden plants my father-in-law cherished, causing even more damage. In the end, letting my mother-in-law have her way and just apologizing with a yes, I'm sorry, seems to be the most peaceful solution. Waiting for the storm to pass. I'm exhausted. Dad, I'm sorry for showing you such an unpleasant side. Finally freed from my mother-in-law's nagging, I spoke to the portrait again. When my father-in-law suffered a stroke, my mother-in-law did almost nothing, claiming, I don't have the energy for caregiving. Instead, I took care of him. My father-in-law, who would suffer from headaches and joint pains with changes in the weather or seasons, appreciated my efforts to maintain a consistent temperature and humidity, often thanking me with a gentle smile, saying, "It makes quite a difference." Thank you. Having lost my biological father in childhood, I was initially uncertain how to interact with my father-in-law, but despite his imposing presence, he was incredibly kind-hearted. In various situations, I remember him thanking me. He was someone who didn't hesitate to express his gratitude to anyone, and was positive about daily life. One memory that stands out is from the early days after I married into the family, when I was still getting used to the kitchen here. Distracted by trying to learn the family's recipes, I forgot to turn on the oven, and come dinner time, there was no food. Bracing myself for a scolding, my father-in-law instead said, "When you're hungry, any meal feels like a feast. We can just wait a bit." And thanked me for always preparing delicious meals. He had a way of easing my worries, which didn't change even when he became ill. Even when I was inexperienced with caregiving, he continued to say, "This helps a lot, thank you." He was like a real father to me. That's why, even as time passes since his passing, I find myself talking to his portrait every morning and worrying about the temperature and humidity in the room before it rains. With my mother-in-law becoming more aggressive, I sought solace in the smiling portrait. "Hey, what's this? It's all wrinkled and covered in hair." That evening, while cleaning up after dinner, my husband, holding up a shirt I had ironed and packed in the suitcase earlier in the evening, confronted me. "What's with the bedroom? It's a mess, and the luggage for tomorrow's trip is scattered everywhere. What's going on? Give me a break. Didn't I tell you I need to leave early tomorrow?" Since losing his father, my husband's demeanor had changed. His words and actions had become harsher than before. I deeply realized that my father-in-law truly was the pillar of this household. Startled by the shirt thrown at me with a stern face by my husband, I was surprised. "What? What do you mean the luggage is scattered?" Holding the now unrecognizable shirt, I hurried to check the bedroom. "What's this?" Through the wide-open window, the pouring rain had soaked the curtains. Luggage had spilled out of the suitcase onto the bed, scattered all around. In a panic, I closed the window and crouched down to wipe up the rainwater. "Wait, you're Leo?" In the corner of the room, shivering and drenched, was the local cat, Leo. Feeling so cold and shivering, "Poor thing, come here, I'll dry you off." Despite the chaos in the room, I couldn't ignore the soaked cat and gently wrapped Leo in a towel. "I know, you're not the kind of kid to do something like this." I hugged Leo, who meowed softly. "What are you doing?" Just then, my husband's irritated voice came from behind. "That's a stray, isn't it? Don't waste a towel on something like that. It probably caused all this mess in the room. Get it out of here." Behind my disgruntled husband stood my mother-in-law, exclaiming, "What a disaster. The room and the travel luggage are in shambles. And what is that filthy thing? Using a fine towel on such a creature is unbelievable. Your lack of common sense is appalling." Far from being speechless, she seemed triumphant in her tirade. To care for a cat that barged in and wreaked havoc in the house instead of addressing this mess is outrageous. Faced with my mother-in-law's voice, louder than ever, I finally retorted. "With all due respect, mother-in-law, it wasn't Leo who made this mess, was it?" "What? That's impossible," my mother-in-law retorted, but it was clear something was off. After all, the shirt Kevin brought was wrinkled and covered in hair, but not wet. If a soaking wet cat had caused the mischief, the shirt and the luggage would be wet too, right? Indeed, while the items on the bed were a mess, they weren't wet. And it seemed only the shirt was covered in hair, the rest was merely scattered. Plus, I had closed the suitcase and placed it beside the shelf. It's impossible for a cat to move it onto the bed and open the lock. But that wasn't all. My mother-in-law's hands were covered in several band-aids. Those injuries weren't there in the morning, so it's proof they occurred in the afternoon. If my guess is correct, those wounds were caused by scratches from Leo. The window isn't broken, and the screen isn't torn, so how did Leo get in by itself? And only where this little one was, it's all wet. There are no wet footprints either. Someone had to do this on purpose. As I spoke while looking her in the eye, my mother-in-law slowly backed away. Her behavior was as good as an admission of her own guilt. And those band-aids on your hand. But before I could finish, my husband's loud voice echoed. Enough. What? Startled by the shout close to me, my husband furiously declared. I don't care. Just get rid of it and clean up quickly. Don't make me say it again, I have an early start tomorrow. I'll sleep in the guest room tonight. Get it ready. Despite my shock, I retorted. It's not whatever. This is going too far to be dismissed as a mere prank. It's time to get serious. I couldn't contain my anger at my mother-in-law's excessive behavior. But my husband lashed out, don't be ridiculous. It's your job to handle things inside the house. Do I bring home every little issue from work and complain? No, right? Yet, what about you? Even when I come home tired, I can't rest because I'm bombarded with complaints about this and that every single day. I'm sick of it. It seemed his pent-up frustration from hearing daily complaints about my mother-in-law had finally erupted. But that was misplaced. I never complained to my husband. It was my mother-in-law who concocted stories and whispered them to my husband. Why am I being blamed? I feel just as bad as you do. I tried to speak again, but my angry husband didn't let me finish, grabbing my arm and pulling me towards the entrance. Enough. Just go somewhere. If you're not here, my mother won't have anything to complain about. I was locked out before I could even put on my shoes. The sound of the lock clicking closed. Wait, open up. Kevin. Hey. I called out loudly, but there was no response from my husband. Instead, I heard my mother-in-law's malicious laughter, ehehe. After all, she is just an outsider. That's my Kevin. I've raised a good son. Even without seeing her face, I could easily imagine my mother-in-law's spiteful smile. Just like that dirty stray cat. Haha, a stray wife, I suppose. Serves you right. Then the lights at the entrance were turned off, and I was left out in the pouring rain with Leo in my arms. I can't believe this. A few days after I was locked out and sought refuge at my parents' home, the main family of my in-laws summoned me. Being called by the main house of a historically significant family, my mother sent me off, urging me to apologize so as not to get divorced. But I felt gloomy. I'm probably going to be scolded. I was thinking of discussing things, but now I might just say I want a divorce first. There's been no contact since that incident. As I approached with a heavy heart, I was greeted by a room full of relatives, their presence more imposing than I expected, which made me freeze. On the other hand, my mother-in-law and husband seemed triumphant, as if they had won a great victory. Could this be a discussion about divorce? This is more serious than I thought. I grew even more nervous, but the head of the main family, my grandfather-in-law by marriage, unexpectedly brought up a different topic. Today, we've gathered to discuss inheritance. Traditionally, the head of the family has taken all the assets, lending them to relatives rather than distributing them. But now, we plan to change with the times and distribute them. Relieved that this wasn't an interrogation, I relaxed a bit. Meanwhile, my mother-in-law and husband perked up, pushing past the relatives. What will the distribution look like? What about the house we're living in? There are also lands, vacation homes, and the company, right? My mother-in-law, who had called me thick-skinned, greedily stepped forward. She even whispered to my husband to seize the opportunity for a promotion and to claim management rights. My husband didn't seem opposed to the idea. Seeing their shamelessly eager faces, I resolved to go through with the divorce. I could easily envision a future where, with their newfound wealth, my husband and mother-in-law would label me as greedy or a freeloader. It would be better to sever ties completely. They would probably be pleased to divorce me now. However, the grandfather-in-law said, "There's no inheritance for you too," with a heavy sigh, rejecting my mother-in-law and husband outright. Huh? Caught off guard, the great-grandfather said to the two. "The inheritance will be distributed to Tiffany. You two will get nothing." Suddenly named, I was speechless, and the mother-in-law's face went pale. "You must be joking. A daughter-in-law has no such rights." Besides, she just ran away suddenly, showing no sense of responsibility. She's a failure who can't even have a child. We were thinking of divorcing her, right, Kevin? Yeah, dealing with domestic troubles is a hassle. If we're short-handed in managing the house or the company, it's more efficient and better for mental health to hire someone. He dismissed me coldly. Then, upon hearing their claims, the great-grandfather pulled out an envelope from his pocket. A will. As the two looked confused, the grandfather-in-law solemnly read out his son's will, the father-in-law. It stated that in the event of any dispute after his death, all properties lent out should be returned to the main family. However, regarding Tiffany, the daughter-in-law, the protection of the main family would continue. In other words, no matter what happened, I would always receive support from the main family. This can't be. This has to be a lie. Kevin was speechless, and my mother-in-law was stunned. In his lifetime, my son was worried about family discord after his passing. I laughed it off as overthinking, but it seems his concerns were valid. To drive Tiffany into a corner just months after my son's passing, how shameful. The grandfather-in-law shrugged. Tiffany, I intend to distribute the assets you need to live on from now. Lending would tie you to the house, but with a distribution, you can manage even if you divorce and are on your own. Or you can remain as the wife of the family and take a son-in-law if you wish. I was adopted too, so I can somewhat understand your position. As the main family, we respect your decision, so don't worry. He said with a smile, looking very much like the father-in-law I remembered. Wait, that's too much. What have we done? It was this daughter-in-law who left on her own. We are the victims here. Naturally, my mother-in-law and Kevin wouldn't accept this so easily. Spitting while insisting that I, the daughter-in-law, was the bad one. No need to add insult to injury. What are you talking about? As my mother-in-law looked puzzled, an unexpected person appeared in the hall at the grandfather-in-law's signal. You. Surprised, I looked at the grandfatherly figure who then showed an envelope similar to the will. Your father-in-law asked me to contact the main family if anything happened. Kicking your wife out barefoot and penniless on a rainy night didn't seem right, so I intervened, right? Leo saw it too? Old man in the neighborhood handed Leo over to me from his arms. Thank you for the shoes and fare that night. I couldn't thank you in person, but I didn't expect such consideration. Holding the warm Leo, I expressed my gratitude. No need for thanks, I received your delicious fruit. Don't be formal. I owed your father-in-law a favor from the past. Glad I could repay it. He teared up as if reminiscing. Mutual help, that's what he used to say. A good man he was. The neighbors knew you were having a tough time after he passed. You've been patient. I felt a warmth in my eyes. Grateful for the seeds of kindness the father-in-law had sown until the very end. And for the neighbors' support, thanks to him. Still think you're the victim? The grandfather-in-law asked Kevin and my mother-in-law, who were gaping at our exchange. A daughter-in-law is ultimately an outsider. If you can't respect others, then you too should leave. Kevin, you're no longer needed at the company. Both of you, start over elsewhere and learn humility. At his roar, Kevin and my mother-in-law shrank back. Eek. No. Under the cold gazes of the grandfather-in-law and the assembled relatives, Kevin and my mother-in-law felt like they were on pins and needles. Afterwards, under the main family's watchful eye, my mother-in-law and Kevin left the house. Kevin struggled to find a new job, and they both started doing part-time work. As for me, I divorced but chose to stay in the house. The main family also shows concern, advising me to consult with them if there's any change or possibility of remarriage. I received some fresh peaches from the neighbor. They're the first of the season, so let's enjoy them together. Here. Let's share a little with Leo too. Surrounded by the smiling faces of the father-in-law's portrait and the neighbors, I plan to cherish these peaceful days moving forward. My name is Shannon, and I'm 29 years old. I've been a stay-at-home mom for 2 years now, having just experienced the joy of giving birth for the first time recently. Despite the challenges of parenting and dealing with postpartum issues, the sheer cuteness of my angelic son blows all my fatigue away. Haha, with those big, round eyes, he might just grow up to be a handsome young man. I just can't help but be an over-the-top proud parent, even so soon after his birth. However, despite my happiness, I have a concern. It's the constant visits from my mother-in-law, Nancy. My in-laws live about a 30-minute walk from our house. With my husband, Tom, busy at work and my own parents living far away, Nancy comes over to support me after giving birth. Ideally, her presence should be a blessing, but she hardly ever looks after my son, let alone helps with the housework. She just lies on the sofa, watching drama DVDs she brings with her. Instead, she orders me around, asking for tea or to fetch tissues, as if I'm at her beck and call. Even though she insisted on coming over to help, what kind of support is this supposed to be? Driven to my limits, I've told her that's enough and sent her away, only to be severely scolded by Tom later that evening. Without a doubt, Nancy must have complained to him. Even when I plead to stop because he will make our son crying, Tom's anger is fierce. He's a mama's boy. I wish I could go back and knock some sense into my past self for not realizing this before we got married. He constantly nags me to replicate his mother's cooking or to match my fashion sense to hers, saying, "My mom does it like this." No matter what I say, Tom worships his mother like a goddess, treating me as if I'm a follower in his cult. But I didn't give up and kept discussing the issue with Tom repeatedly. If you could just help out a little, even without relying on your mom, it would make a huge difference. What? I'm exhausted from working all day. Plus, the baby would be happier if you took care of him. Whenever I try to talk to him, his attention is fixed on the TV or his phone, making it impossible to have a real conversation. Doesn't he care about his son at all? And I'm just as exhausted, if not more. With bloodshot eyes from lack of sleep, fatigue, and stress, I glare at Tom. Just so you know, talking to my dad about this is off the table. He's busy too, and I won't stand for any trouble you cause. He briefly looks at me, sternly laying down the law. My father-in-law, John, may be nearing retirement and busy with work, but he's always treated me like a daughter. If he could just speak up against Tom and Nancy, it would be a huge relief. As I reminisce about my conversations with Tom, Nancy's insensitive call snaps me back to reality. "Shannon, the baby's fussing. Come and soothe him now. You're interrupting a good part." She says this without taking her eyes off her drama. I stop folding the laundry and head to my son's side. I stick out my tongue behind Nancy's back, who's engrossed in the TV screen. For me, struggling with parenting and sleep deprivation, the presence of do-nothing Nancy is a significant stressor. But it doesn't matter to my son. Since Tom isn't supportive, I'm all that my child has. Well, I guess I'll be going now. As the clock strikes 5 p.m., Nancy hastily gets up from the sofa. She confidently uses my vanity as if it were her own, getting all dolled up before heading out into the evening. Apparently, she attends a dance class for beauty and health reasons. From the time of our wedding greeting, she had been boasting, "I used to be a model, and I still have a passion for beauty. I guess that's why I always look younger than my age." Nancy is 58, but she does look younger than her age. Still, if she has the energy for hobbies, she might as well go during the time she spends lounging at our house. Grandma doesn't help at all, does she? As I speak to my son cradled in my arms, he softly breathes in his sleep. An hour later, the doorbell rings. It was John who came. Fed up with my mother-in-law's daily behavior, I had secretly consulted with John over the phone, ignoring Tom's warnings. He said he made time to visit because he also wanted to see his grandson, despite his busy schedule. Seeing my sleeping son, John smiled and said, "He's adorable," with a gentleness entirely unlike Tom. So, she didn't help with the housework at all today either, and left for her so-called dance class in the evening? Looking around the messy house, John sighed. It seemed like he had just found out about the dance classes. Seeing the state of the untidy house, he must have realized that she truly hadn't been helping at all. He apologized to me. "It's not your fault," I hurried to say, but he shook his head. "My wife insisted she would support you, but this is unacceptable. I'll make sure she doesn't come here from tomorrow on. Also, it seems my son isn't much help, but if you need anything, please tell me. Thank you so much. It seemed John was also worried about Tom's lack of interest in household chores and parenting. Feeling the kindness of someone after a long time, I was on the verge of tears. It's been about 3 months since John visited our home. Thanks to him, she has stopped coming over. I've been feeling much lighter ever since. Just the absence of my mother-in-law has made such a difference in my peace of mind. My son's neck is stronger now, and I've found a bit more ease in caring for him than before. Ah, it's a mess again. Glancing at Tom's half-open room, I sighed. Discarded shirts and socks were balled up on the floor. I threw them into the laundry basket and decided to sweep the floor of his room while I was at it. As I shoved the cleaning tools under the bed, I felt something odd. Did I hit something? Moving the cleaning tools as if to drag something closer, a plastic folder emerged, containing a bank book inside. Such a slob, I muttered. I picked up the bank book and placed it on his desk, then my breath hitched. It was the bank book I had created for my son, not Tom's. Why was it in Tom's room when it's usually kept elsewhere? The bank book for my son only had the money from his birth gifts, but it was a substantial amount. My parents and John had generously contributed for his future. A bad feeling washed over me, and I nervously checked inside the bank book. All the money was withdrawn. On impulse, I opened Tom's drawer and pulled out his bank book. I knew it was wrong, but I couldn't stop myself. Just as I thought. Opening Tom's bank book, I saw that his recent bonus had been completely withdrawn. Noticing the alarmingly low balance, my mind went blank. Even as my son's cries echoed from afar, I was too stunned to rush to him as I usually would. Hours later, when Tom returned from work and I confronted him, he was initially angry that I had gone through his things. But eventually, he confessed. I gave it to my mom. What? Why would you need to support your mom? I can't believe you'd do something like this without telling me. Even dipping into our child's savings. As I pressed him for answers, Tom slammed his hand on the desk in frustration. Mom said she was struggling financially, so I helped her out. She's had her own hardships we don't know about. It's my money anyway. If you have a problem with that, we might as well get a divorce. Tom's outburst woke our son, who had been sleeping in his crib, and he started to cry. I hurriedly picked up my son, comforting him. You earned it? At least the birth gift money isn't yours. My father and your parents gave that for our son's future. Don't you feel the slightest bit sorry? And please, stop mentioning divorce so lightly. Tom snorted disapprovingly at the sight of our son calming down in my arms. Then, he presented a piece of paper on the desk. It's a divorce application. Moreover, the section for the husband is already filled out. I was shocked, and my eyes widened. I don't really care when we divorce, but you wouldn't want to live in poverty with a newborn baby, would you? Ah, so he thinks this will make me keep quiet. My feelings towards my childish husband were rapidly cooling. Come to think of it, I looked down at my son. Tom had never once held him. Seeing me speechless, Tom laughed. As if he was confident that he had the upper hand. That's the situation, so you'll be covering living expenses from your personal account for a while. With a pat on my shoulder, Tom left the room. As the living room door closed, I slumped to the ground, overwhelmed. Tears flowed naturally. My son in my arms reached out to me and smiled innocently. My mind was already made up. The next day, I first submitted the divorce application given by Tom to the court and then took the train. Leaving a note that read, I'll submit the divorce application. I'll follow up with a claim for alimony and the misused money. Along with my wedding ring. My biggest concern was taking my still young son outside, but he looked around curiously and was fortunately in a good mood. I reminded myself to be extra careful with my son's health. My destination was my parents' home. Since I only brought what my son and I needed, along with a few personal valuables, I didn't have much luggage. Having informed my parents the night before, they both welcomed us warmly. They were angry when I told them about Tom and mother-in-law's actions and kindly suggested that I help with the family business while raising my son. My family runs an orchard. It's hard work, but I have some knowledge and experience from helping out since I was a child. I was starting to think that wouldn't be so bad. The next day, while I was finally relaxing, my phone rang. The caller ID showed my mother-in-law's name. Reluctantly, I answered the call. "What do you think you're doing, Shannon?" The moment I put the phone to my ear, I was greeted by a screeching yell. Annoyed, I responded, "Who are you?" Huh? Taken aback by my changed attitude, Nancy was at a loss for words. As if remembering, I exaggeratedly exclaimed, "Ah. Is that you? I've already divorced your son, so I had completely forgotten about you." My lighthearted response made her voice tremble. "Shannon, do you realize what you've done? How could you just do something like this?" Probably, Tom had cried to her that he never thought I would actually submit the divorce application. I could understand why she'd call in a panic. Me being unreasonable? The problem lies with your son who gave me a filled-out divorce application as a threat without being serious. It worked out well for me, though. My words didn't satisfy Nancy. "I'll forgive you for this, so marry my son again." He's been crying and is still in shock. I wondered if he was still with her. Imagining Tom crying and listening our phone call made me shiver. I was utterly dumbfounded by his audacity to try and fix things through his mother. Enough already. I don't need a mama's boy husband or a mother-in-law who frequents nightclubs. What? Nancy was choking over the phone with surprise, wondering, "How did you know that?" It's clear she reacted to the word nightclub. About the events of last night, after Tom left the living room, I took out my phone. One reason was to inform my parents that I was getting a divorce and returning home. Another was to explain the situation to kind John, to express my gratitude and apologies. That's when John told me everything. The reason Nancy was frequently at my house was to attend a nightclub that opened at 6 p.m. There were various reasons for this, but primarily, my house was closer to the club than her own. Additionally, being at my house during the day allowed her to avoid household chores at her own home. Other reasons included that it was easier to make excuses for coming home late by blaming me or my son, all of which conveniently benefited Nancy. It seems she was infatuated with one of the bartenders and had been spending quite a lot on him. Nancy, who had always been a housewife, couldn't possibly have her own money. Moreover, she can't drink alcohol due to her physical condition. She had been withdrawing money from a John's account, buying drinks for them while she herself drank soft drinks. Prompted by my consultation, John grew suspicious of Nancy. Even after being forbidden from visiting our home, Nancy continued to find excuses to go out. Feeling that something was amiss, John followed her and was shocked to discover she had been visiting nightclubs. He also learned that she had been misusing his money at the same time. To think she would even use my son and grandson's money. If only I had discovered this sooner, I could have prevented this. "I'm so sorry to you and my grandson." During our phone call, knowing the situation on my end, John apologized, sounding defeated. "So, you lied to Tom about needing money because you ran out of funds to lavish on the barmen?" At my remark, Nancy fell silent. Over the phone, I could hear Tom's voice, "Mom, you're lying, right?" As expected, Tom was listening in. After a moment of silence, Nancy suddenly erupted in anger. "Don't use such vulgar language. I'm just showing my affection to Jason. He's always happy to see me." Jason must be the name of the bartender. Hearing her painful outburst, I sighed. The thought of my son's money being used for my MIL's entertainment reignited my anger. Neither John nor I will let this go. Be prepared. I ended the call and turned off my phone. This happened a few days later. This time, I received a call from Tom, who offered a sincere apology for the misuse of money and Nancy's behavior. The divorce application was his naive attempt to follow his mother's advice, thinking, if you present a divorce application, she won't be able to say anything, not realizing the seriousness of his actions. Being deceived by his mother, whom he trusted implicitly, and now facing a divorce, Tom seemed to have finally awakened. "I'm truly sorry. I've transferred $20,000 to your account as a gesture of my sincerity, covering the misused funds and for the trouble caused. I hope this shows my sincerity. Let's try to be happy together as a family of 3 again. I only have you, just as you only have me." This felt like a classic Romeo maneuver, and I got goosebumps. There's no chance for reconciliation. I only have my son. I'll be expecting child support from now on. We'll discuss this further with a lawyer involved. I knew that this $20,000 came from money John had advanced. It was from a separate account he had been saving for his retirement, not the one misused by Nancy. From now on, Tom would have to work hard to repay his father and pay child support, under his father's supervision. Tom, believing I would forgive him, was crying and apologizing, but it was all too late. I said goodbye, ended the call, and immediately blocked his number. After finalizing discussions with Tom through a lawyer, 2 months have passed. Now, I'm helping with my parents' orchard and focusing on raising my child. Even after the divorce, I've continued to keep in touch with John. He sometimes visits to see his grandson. From him, I learned that Nancy had even made secret debts. John, who had been preparing for a divorce behind the scenes, mercilessly kicked her out. Now, it seems Tom has reluctantly taken in Nancy, and they are living together. Both Tom and Nancy are working to repay their debts, forced into a life of extreme poverty. Looking into my son's innocent eyes, I'm determined to raise him so he doesn't end up like his father or grandmother.